Hello again. Now, Parliament's Home Affairs Portfolio Committee holding countrywide hearings to fulfill a constitutional court order that the National Assembly should amend the Electoral Act. This is in order to allow independent candidates to be elected in the provincial legislatures and also the National Assembly. But is this what South Africa needs in order to improve governance, for example? Let's discuss this with Policy Analyst Nompumelelo Sibalukhulu. She's also the author of a book entitled The Democratic Opportunity: Does South Africa Need Electoral Reform? Thank you very much, Nompumelelo, for joining us. I interviewed the chairperson of the Portfolio Committee, the Home Affairs Portfolio Committee, a couple of days ago, Mr. Musa Chaban, as they're going around the country with these hearings, and also spoke to KSAC and Lawson Knight, who are concerned about the process. So I just want to get some insights here, and you've been very much one of the people who are focusing on this process. Do we need such reform at this stage? Just an overriding question first. What's your sense? The Constitutional Court found that we did, but some people believe that we're not ready for such a move.
Thank you so much for having me, Dan. I think to the extent that the case was about allowing independent candidates to be able to contest elections, the Constitutional Court found that the Electoral Act was unconstitutional because of the fact that it required an individual to be a member of a political party and then selected by that political party to be on a party list before they can be elected as a representative in the legislature and in provincial legislatures and in Parliament. So to the extent that that was preventative of people actually running for elections who weren't members of political parties, that was unconstitutional. So it's a little bit different from the debate around broad electoral reform for South Africa, which really is centered around the discussion about the need to strengthen accountability and to strengthen the link between representatives in the legislature and constituencies on the ground. So to the extent that the bill addresses what the Constitutional Court has said, that is one thing. But whether or not it addresses that issue of accountability and the weak link between representatives, that is another issue altogether, Dan.
Yes, there are two separate issues very clearly. But just talk about this anomaly that the Constitutional Court found was there in terms of allowing independents to stand for elections. We saw independents standing in the local government elections on the 1st of November, but now this is for provincial legislatures and the National Assembly. In your view, in your analysis, I mean, is this anomaly something that could help somehow to sort of further democratize our electoral laws?
I think it does contribute to the democratization of the electoral law to the extent that it allows for more contestants beyond the current political parties that are now dominating the political system and the electoral system. Because in South Africa, one of the challenges is that we have political parties that are disproportionately powerful in determining the course of the country, whether it's policy, whether it's the selection and appointment of leaders, and there's very little public participation in that process. And so by allowing independent candidates to be able to contest, we are broadening the spectrum or the options for people to choose in terms of who they want to be represented by in Parliament and in provincial legislatures. So it does, to a certain extent, work towards giving more options and therefore greater competition and therefore democratization of the electoral system.
Could it help? I know you've made your point very clear about these two separate things, this particular one we're talking about, and of course the broader issue of electoral reform. But could this, addressing this issue of independent candidates, assist in some way that if you do involve independents in the elections, you just might begin to improve some level of accountability in the system?
Well, I don't think so, Dan, because what we have right now in the bill is a multiple member sort of system that is now being suggested, as opposed to a mixed system, which would include a constituency-based system, which is first past the post, meaning that the country would be divided into different constituencies, and people then be allowed to elect a representative for their particular constituency. The current model that the bill is presenting to us does not have a constituency model like we have at the local government level. So that means that in terms of accountability, nothing much changes, because there's no way that a voter will also be able to hold an independent candidate accountable if they don't perform. There's no direct link between the constituency and the independent candidate per se. But of course, it might be easier to point out what the candidate himself or herself will be doing in the sense that they won't be taking their line from their political party, because that's one of the criticisms, is that are elected representatives loyal to their parties, or are they loyal to the voting public? And so that then we remove that issue of whether the independent candidate is loyal to a party or loyal to the country or to their policy positions, etc. So perhaps it deals with that aspect, but it still does not deal with the issue that there is still no direct accountability. And I think one of the things we need to be thinking about as we think about reforming the electoral system in this country is the extent to which we can give more power to the electorate, not just at election time, but beyond elections and between elections. And one of the things that can assist with that perhaps is a recall, being able to recall representatives that are not performing at the level that voters believe that they should be.
I would love to explore that further. In fact, I will do so in the near future. Nompumelelo, we don't have much time for that now. Thank you very much, though, for your insights about the current process that's ongoing in the country. That's Nompumelelo Sibalukhulu, a policy analyst and author of The Democratic Opportunity. Does South Africa need electoral reform?